All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher. We're going to go all NBA today, talk about conference finals matchups, maybe look ahead a little bit to the finals, and also talk about the draft. So let's welcome in Drew Dinsick and our guest today, Seth Partnow, author of Mid-Range Theory, a writer for The Athletic, one of the best basketball minds covering the NBA. And Seth, let's start with Heat Celtics, which is 3-0, as a lot of people expected it would be. It's just the other team has the 3, and the Heat now are heavy favorites to win the series, as you would expect. We can get into Joe Mazzulla and the coaching. I think that the more pertinent thing is that Caleb Martin is out playing Jaylen Brown and that kind of stuff. So do you think that the Celtics have any chance in this series now, Seth, or what do you think?
I think that if there was a team that was going to come back from 3-0, this season is as good as any. That said, I think the series is over. It's the psychology of it as much as nothing else. The Celtics looked, for lack of a better term, kind of broken during the game yesterday, and it's hard to see how they kind of run that back for a team that I think has been a little brittle and has shown it, over the last couple of years with their, tendency to kick away close games in the clutch. So it's almost like they started a series and started the game that way instead of it rearing its head in the last 5 minutes last night.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a narrative nature to me wanting to kind of look at that result. And really, like, if they had given you a full heart perform last night and lost and still lost, then game 4 feels like a no-show, a 1-2-3 Cancun type of deal. But you didn't even really get a game effort out of Boston in game 3. And, presumably with, some of the kind of experience in that locker room, and, there are some pretty outward voices, there's at least the chance that there's a more spirited effort from this crew in game 4, and send it back to Boston. They're going to be meaningful favorites at that point. If it's a 3-2 series instead of 3-0, the market is going to treat this team very differently. But it's been a really, really tough one to figure out. And something you said that it was interesting off the top there, if any series we were going to have a 0-3 comeback this year, feels like it would be a ripe year for it. Do you just get the general sense that we are living in a time where the NBA is a little bit flatter? There's not a huge difference between the 8th seed and the 1 seed in either conference right now, and it's just in general we've spread talent thinly enough across the association that you can have an 8th seed go on to a finals?
No, I think that's right. I think that normally you get to a 3-0 series lead, and it's like, well, one team is vastly superior than the other, is the normal scope of things. And I suppose that's possible that right now this Heat team is that much better than this Celtics team. I think it's much more likely that we're getting, 3 consecutive heads and things that are closer to 50-50. And then, from there, I think that the sort of psychology of a playoff series indicates in a number of different ways that these are not independent events, and so they kind of build on each other. The most surprising result to me actually was was game 2, simply because and I'm sure you guys are aware of this. Like, road team wins game 1. I think Dan Feldman had this stat. It was something like the first time in like 17 chances at the road team sweeping that they'd actually won the second game in a series. That's a spot where over the last however many years, home teams have an average margin of victory of like 10 or 11.
Yeah, and I think the market is starting to bake that in, where the Celtics were -8.5 in game 1, and then game 2, despite the fact that they were coming off a loss, they get upgraded to 10.5-point favorites. So the series effects adds a couple points. You mentioned one interesting thing, Seth, which is the idea that the Celtics are kind of brittle. And I think certainly, particularly down the stretch of game 2, there's 3.5 minutes left. The Heat are down 2 as 10.5-point dogs. And it felt like a 0% chance the Celtics were going to win that game. And it felt like they felt like that as well. But at the same time, this Boston team, They were down 3-2 to Milwaukee. Tatum scores 46 in Game 6 against Giannis. They win Game 7 in Miami last year. They're down 3-2 to Philly this season. They go in and they win that series. It's a strange team that seems to play at extremes, but I think this series right now, I think it's kind of a commentary on like the feedback loops that come out of hot shooting, where I think that Boston, where it was very clear last night where it was like, all right, well, we're defending the first thing, we're double teaming Butler, and then the Heat, Vincent and Strus are just raining threes, and it starts to feel like there's nothing we can do. And then on the other side, with Tatum and Brown on offense, I think the key thing there is that like there's been 10 Eastern Conference Finals games between these two teams the past 2 years, and Tatum and Brown have 81 assists and 79 turnovers. And the fact that their loose handles, I think, are being really punished by this Heat defense, and the fact that they're not elite passers, I think the fact that they're not comfortable on offense, and then on defense, the Heat are just making every single tough shot. I think that just builds this feedback where you get to the breaking point last night where it really did seem like they gave up. But talking about the Celtics defense, do you think there's anything else that they should be doing defensively, or do they just have to hope that Caleb Martin stops being Klay Thompson?
I actually didn't love their defensive approach yesterday. I thought there were a number of situations where, okay, Jimmy Butler is cooking, obviously, but there was a play early in the second half where Jimmy Butler got to kind of the short corner on the right side, pump faked, pivoted, fade away, and hit like an 18-footer over Derek White, and then Derek White lands on him, and it's an and one. It's just like, okay, if you're going to force that shot, maybe don't foul, but if you're going to force that shot and he makes that, and he's going to make that 12 times a game, you shake his hand. Instead, there were a lot of situations, and Jimmy Butler, I think the sort of playoff Jimmy is basically he realizes that everyone else is frantic because the playoffs are intense. And so he's the guy who's being patient. And so you run, jump, double, bring a second guy when he's not really going anywhere, and he's licking his lips. He's like, cool. That's an easy decision for me. Let me just kick it. And now, yes, you don't expect Caleb Martin and Gabe Vincent to be hitting shots at the rate they're doing, but at the same time, you are giving guys, catch and shoot jumpers over recovering defenders because you're double teaming a player who isn't really going anywhere, in part because you're scared that he's hit a bunch of tough shots. But I think the pre-reaction to that, I think, contributed a little to the snowball effect. And we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about like the Celtics abhorrent transition defense.
Yeah.
And that's as much, you mentioned the turnovers and assists with Brown and Tatum. How many of those turnovers also involve them in the backcourt throwing their hands up at the ref as, we get a 5-on-4, 5-on-3 the other way?
Yeah. And it definitely felt like in Game 3, the Heat, they leaned into that pretty hard. I mean, Kyle Lowry was out there with the second unit, every missed basket, it was push. And they got some very easy looks in transition there because the Celtics really didn't seem to have their A game last night. All this said, we're dealing with small sample size where we have the better team facing a sweep, facing elimination in Game 4. Like this has only happened 10 times in the playoffs in my database here. And weirdly, almost every single time in Game 4, these games are flying over the totals. I don't know if it's you get just in general a spirited effort offensively from the team facing elimination, but 9-1 to the over in these games, going over by an average of 8.5 points is kind of wild to me. And it kind of goes in the face of what I was hoping to try to craft as a Game 4 handicap, which is the Celtics have to come up with some defensive adjustments here. That when they roll out hey, we're sticking with our small ball, crew to open, Game 3, it was like, oh no, like really, we're not going to try anything here to try to make this a little bit tougher on a Heat squad. Would you expect that they do come up with some defensive adjustments in Game 4 and that we may buck the trend on what has been pretty clear situational spot that says bet the over?
So I think the problem for them is been, from a structural standpoint, has been more offensive than it has been defensively. I actually thought their defense was reasonably okay in Games 1 and 2, and Miami just made a bunch of tough plays. And I think they over-adjusted to that. And also, to the extent, as we were just talking about, a lot of their defensive problems are self-inflicted by bad ends of offensive possessions. And, this has been a staple of them kind of in late close games, not just this year, but over previous years. I think I've been talking about this before. Last year's Boston team was, controlling first situation, and the general team quality was the second worst clutch team of the play-by-play era in my database. And I think, some of that's noise, but some of that is, I think we've observed that the Celtics do these things. And again, it's these clunky, bad, unbalanced offensive possessions that leave them in bad floor balance. And then they've got some guys who will talk to refs. And I think that that contributes to it. So I think that much like last year's finals, I think was more about their offensive failures than like being unable to deal with Steph. I think it's, if they clean that up, then I think the defense, barring Kalen Martin continuing to be a 75% contested 3-point shooter or whatever, I think they put themselves in a better situation.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to play some Celtics series here. This 8-1 price has been staring at me all morning. I can't. I kind of agree with your first sentiment the most strongly, which is if we're ever going to see it, this is the situation we are. And I don't want it. And I've been resistant to back Celtics anything all series. I thought the opening price was disrespectful to the Heat. I played the Heat in games 1 and 2, just taking the points, and then here we are, where now I am going to buy into this Celtics team that has given us no evidence that we should believe in them, which I think may be the exact point you want to buy low. Jay, you going to play some Celtics series, or is this one in the books for you?
No, I bet some Celtics series last night at plus 900. I bet them at 20-1 to win the NBA title. Yeah, let's do it all. I think that there is a little bit too much anchoring to the thought that, teams down 3-0 are 0-149, which is pretty intimidating. But at the same time, to Seth's earlier point, most of those 3-0 leads are Denver going up 3-0 over Minnesota. It's not minus 600 pre-series favorite being down 3-0, being fully healthy and having insane shooting variance go against them. So I think that the Celtics, look, if they just get game 4, which is close to a coin flip, then I think that at that point they're like plus 280 to win the series because they've got 2 of the last 3 at home. So they just need to get 1, I think. And then all of a sudden, I think a lot of the mental aspects get a lot easier for them, and they just get less broken if they win 1 on the road. So I think that I think they are live, but obviously the Heat, who deserve all the credit in the world, are justifiably heavy favorites. Let's go to another team that is justifiably heavy favorites, the Denver Nuggets, who play tonight in LA. The Lakers are 3-point favorites. The total is 224.5. And I think the Nuggets, Seth, the market, and I think just the general public were a little cool on Denver coming into the playoffs because of how they ended the season with their last 6 weeks, the thought about their defense perhaps not being elite. But right now they look like an absolute juggernaut and potentially the best team in the league by margin. Do you think that they are the clear best team and deserve to be heavy favorites in the finals? As right now they are. They're minus 200 to win the title.
Wow. They've certainly been the best team across the playoffs. With no disrespect to Miami, because I think that I think you guys have rightly pointed out that Miami is shooting over their heads, even if their general play might be something that is sustainable. No, I think that you mentioned that people reading too much into the Nuggets last 6 weeks, when qualitatively, like, they had obviously kind of you look at the amount of times they rested players, the minute distributions. They had obviously, like, all right, we've wrapped up home court advantage by and large, and we are going to operate this way. Maybe it's frustrating for them. Maybe it's certainly frustrating for Michael Malone, but it's a team that has proven all they needed to prove in the regular season and was ready the moment we tipped off in the playoffs. So I think we probably should view the Nuggets as they were through about, beginning of March, not really that last little bit where they just kind of took their foot off the gas.
Have you seen anything in the way that these teams have matched up that has especially surprised you?
The one thing is the way that LA has chosen to try to use Anthony Davis to attack Nikola Jokic. It's been kind of almost ass backwards. It's a little bit like teams think, oh, James Harden is a bad defensive player, let's post him up. And it's like, well, no, you found the thing he does well on defense. Like Nikola Jokic is enormous, and throwing the ball to Anthony Davis, getting out of the way and saying, AD, go through him, is basically it's playing to Jokic's advantage. And I think that while Davis's own numbers have been perfectly fine this series, I don't think that there's been a lot of synergy off of that for the rest of the Lakers, because it's just sort of a very static go at this possession. The spots where the Lakers have had more success have been when they've been able to use basically attack Jamal Murray when he's been guarding Austin Reeves and kind of screening action with LeBron. And the Nuggets have done a better job, I think, the last two games of denying that matchup. I think it's a very different matchup if it's Dennis Schroeder who's setting the screen than Austin Reeves, just because Reeves is at this point a pretty substantially superior offensive player to Schroeder.
Yeah, I think to me, the Denver-Milwaukee game towards the end of the season, which was kind of a prospective MVP matchup, even though neither guy won it, was pretty instructive defensively, because Giannis was driving at Jokic and just couldn't really do anything against Jokic, because Jokic is just so solid and strong. And unless you're, going around him and beating him with quickness, just driving into him, like, he is one of the strongest guys in the league. And also he's just, to your point, gigantic. And so I think that, yeah, that's very apt. And there are certainly matchups where he's going to struggle, like against Stephen Curry or Damian Lillard, but I think driving at him and into him doesn't really achieve a great deal. Seth, I think, like, the Nuggets, it's been a weird series because I don't think they played particularly well in the first two games, or maybe even necessarily for large stretches of game three. And they've just gotten, I don't want to say bailed out, because they are a really good shooting team anyway. So a lot of these shots that Jamal Murray and MPJ are making, like, those are shots that those guys make. But to me, what was most interesting is that Michael Malone basically just binned Aaron Gordon in the fourth quarter and went with Jeff Green. Do you think that there is something else that Denver should be doing with Aaron Gordon in this matchup, or does it just make more sense to play Jeff Green? Because I thought Aaron Gordon was their second best player this season.
No, I think that there was a play they ran right at the start of the third quarter, and I tweeted this out. It was a pretty simple play where Aaron, like, they set a cross screen. Gordon got the ball on the left wing, dumped it into Jokic, and then as LeBron, who was guarding Gordon, kind of sunk into the paint, Gordon set a cross screen for Murray coming across, and they just do that. Just use him as, not on the baseline, but at the top of the floor, use him as a screener, and then you've got MPJ or Jamal Murray getting ball screens from a good screener, or dribble handoffs or whatever, because Gordon can handle the ball as well, with no help defender present. And I think those are very advantageous situations for Denver, which then, makes the decision to just, like, camp in Jokic's lap. It actually makes that a little more fraught than when they've had him on the baseline and the help defender could just kind of sit at the basket waiting for him.
No, yep. Yeah, that makes sense. And honestly, I'm running out of reasons to expect that the Lakers have any kind of ace in the hole adjustment that they can make at this point to really tilt the balance. The historical trends tell you that sweep avoidance is not great when you're the home team down 3-0, only winning 65% of the games. And this is plenty of games in this sample where the home team was meaningfully favored. We've only actually ever seen this in the conference finals 5 times. Mostly the Warriors were putting people on the ropes with the sweep, and we saw Mavericks, of course, do it last year, where they they avoided they achieved the gentleman's sweep, I guess is maybe the more polite way to say it. But the Mavericks, of course, 10-point win at home to force Game 5, where they bowed out. But I think the market's got this one right. I'm not running here to get involved with the Lakers at -3, -148 on the money line is, or -160 on the money line here at the PointsBet is feels a little rich. But is there any angle that you see opening up for a way to attack this Game 4 other than just trying to hope that we get more entertaining basketball in this series?
I've been entertained by the basketball in this series.
Yeah, I would like some more. I would love to see a game 5, like more of MVP Jokic, please. Like,
this game is there's a little bit of the easiest thing for the Lakers to get back to strategy. The easiest thing is to stop giving away the easy baskets with AD and Jared Vanderbilt and Rui Hachimura and LeBron James. Like, oh, we almost got an offensive rebound, but Jokic has it now. He's running away from me. And Davis in particular, I think it's been a really hurt. You mentioned Denver not always playing great this series, but they've kind of kept the scoreboard ticking by getting these sort of consistent transition efforts where AD is sort of, I don't want to say jogging, but he's kind of getting back to the top of the arc, top of the key. And then it's Bruce Brown going to finish on D'Angelo Russell with taking great joy in finishing in that situation, or Aaron Gordon's rim runs or whoever. And they're just getting, when their half court offense has been a little too much. Let's look at Jokic. Let's watch Jamal Cook. They're just getting those every couple of minutes, getting a bucket, an easy bucket in transition when the Lakers, just don't get back. Has really, kind of almost been a run stopper for them, if nothing else.
Yeah. I would love to see the alternate universe where in game 1, Jokic doesn't make that ridiculous 3 over AD at the end of the third quarter, and then Jamal Murray doesn't make the ridiculous foot on the line 2 against LeBron early in the fourth. And if they don't get those 5 points, they very well might lose that game. And then all of a sudden we have an entirely different series. But alas, we do not. And it looks like the
Is this the part where we talk about Austin Reeves banking in threes? Or
yeah, it does even out a little bit. And also when you're up 3-0, you must have done something right, and you probably deserve to be in this position. All right, before we close out with some NBA draft talk, a reminder to download the RotoWorld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in the App Store today. All right, Victor Wembanyama is minus 100,000 to go first overall in the NBA draft. That seems like a pretty good bet, even at that price. I don't really see how that goes wrong. In terms of the upcoming season and his immediate impact, Seth, I mean, how good are the Spurs going to be immediately, do you think, with Wembanyama? Or is it more, as you might expect, 2-3 years down the track where his presence is really going to be felt?
There are teams that if they won the lottery, I would have picked them to be conference finals team next year. The Spurs are not one of them.
Wow.
In part because I think that they are far enough away and their roster is sort of unformed enough that I think that they will probably take the approach of with their cap space kind of temporizing for a year. And all right, let's see what exactly the best way to use Wembanyama is. What do players like Kelton Johnson and Devin Vassell look like when they are like not the best players on the they shouldn't be, when they put in more kind of appropriate roles? What does Jeremy Sohan work next to Wembanyama, or do we need to look to a different, or is he more of a bench player in that? So I think that they will be better next year, but I don't think that they are going to go full gas, no breaks at making the playoffs. I think they could make the playoffs next year if that's what they decided to chase. I don't think they will. Again, other teams, like if you'd somehow ended up on Orlando or Oklahoma City or maybe even Portland, the combination of the talent already there and sort of the desire to let's go would have pushed me more towards that team being an actual threat next season. But I think the Spurs are going to play it a little more patient, and maybe they're a low 30s win team next year.
Interesting. So I've seen and caught a little bit of the buzz and some of the the mind hive around the way you team build around Wembanyama, and I agree with the sentiment that you probably need to be a little bit more aggressive as opposed to trying to say build for year 4 or 5. You want to have a team in year 2 or 3 that I think is, can challenge, just because you never really know with health with a guy this size. Is if you are in the war room kind of game planning a 3-year arc for the Spurs, like who are you trying to put around this player?
But I think a big part of the first year is part of the reason Wembanyama is such an intriguing prospect is because the number of different ways he can be good, the number of different kinds of player he can turn into are is multifaceted, and part of year one is figuring out, all right, playing against NBA players, which of these paths is he more likely to go down? Do we need to get another big to put next to him, or should he be or is there enough defensively there that we can play like a 4-out style, and we really just need to get like a couple big wings? I mean, everyone always needs big wings, but the question is, do you need like an enforcer type stout body next to him, or is going where, all right, well, Aaron Gordon type is or maybe even a Jeremy Grant type is the ideal like 4 to put next to him. But yeah, let's take a year to kind of see what that is and make decisions around that. Obviously, you'd never have too much shooting. So but that's not a Wembanyama specific team building philosophy. So yeah, I think that part of why San Antonio is likely to be a little patient is just, which model of this kind of this tall, mobile, skilled player are we building around?
Yep, that makes sense. I think the suspense in the draft is obviously going to start at number 2. Right now, Scoot Henderson is a slight favorite, -130 to go second over Brandon Miller. Do you have an opinion who the better prospect is? And
what are we doing here is my opinion. What are we doing here? Like, it's I don't know. If it wasn't Charlotte picking second, would it be that close?
Probably not. Yeah. Probably -800.
Yeah. Brandon Miller could end up being a better NBA player than Scoot Henderson. That's certainly possible. But as a prospect, one of them has that pop, that upside to be that elite offensive driver, and the other one profiles more as a guy who could even become an all-star level wing, but like very best case scenario is like a Paul George. And Paul George has been a great player, but Paul George has, I don't think at any point ever been like inner circle best player. He is easily best player on a championship team material, and you have a great deal of team building cushion around him. I think Scoot, I mean, it's unlikely that'll happen because it's unlikely for anyone to happen, but he has more of that in his distribution. And like when you're picking at the top of the draft, unless you're a team that has gotten very fortunate to move up from 12, that's what you're aiming for. You're aiming for that superstar potential, and he has more of it. And so I repeat, like, what are we doing here?
Paul George had a couple weeks at the beginning of the 2021 season where you thought that maybe 2 weeks, maybe.
Paul George had 1 year where he had an MVP in Oklahoma City, but yeah, outside of that, he wasn't. He was never really a top 5 player. So I agree. Last one for you, Seth. In terms of outside the top 3, is there anyone you think could be a late riser that you've got your eye on?
Beyond that, I'll admit to not having dug in a ton either to the players as what I think of them, or even more importantly, when you're talking about that, what sort of the league thinks of them. And that's I think we'll hear a lot more of that in sort of the coming weeks as the folks who are more plugged in with that process and talk to those scouts will kind of suss more out. I'm interested to the cleaning up of the draft process coming in with the new CBA. I'm wondering if that'll start to give us more information earlier when the agent shenanigans of who gets the medical records and things like that, and who gets to actually interview the players no longer is the case. I maintain some bitterness over that, over their players we couldn't even consider when I was in Milwaukee, because he's coming off a major surgery and we don't have his medical records, so guess we can't pick him, which I think is the right approach, because I mean, his knee is completely jacked. Maybe we should have known that. Is a little bit too much of a downside tail risk for someone in a professional capacity to be expected to take on.
That makes sense. Can I ask you just one just a general opinion question? Giving you a free bet here. In the next 5 years, either the Spurs or the Oklahoma City Thunder, you can choose one of those 2 teams wins a title in the next 5 years. Who are you going with?
Thunder.
Thunder. Yeah. Well.
I mean, they have plenty of talent, and I think that they also, for whenever they decide to go, and if players become available, they have the ability to add guys to what is already a very solid, core of young players.
Okay, Seth Partnow says Victor Wembanyama overrated. Will not win a title in the next 5 years. Thank you. No,
Yeah.
just kidding.
Chet Holmgren.
That's far from the worst. That's far from the worst way all have been aggregated. And the funny part about that, by the way, is when they've played an age group competition, like Wembanyama has absolutely murdered Holmgren. So like that's a oops.
Yeah, well,
but it's not just one-on-one. It's
plenty of time to think about Victor v. Chet. For the time being, we'll focus on the Celtics becoming the first team in NBA history to come back from 0-3, which is building. Seth, thank you so much for your time. Can you tell people where to follow you and what you're working on at the moment?
You can find me a number of different places. Right for The Athletic, the Nerder She Wrote podcast on The Athletic. Mo Dakhil and I from Nerder have been doing on Playback TV, doing watch-alongs with all the playoff games. And you can read quick hits from me a couple times a week on the Dunked On network. So those are the best places to find me. And I'm starting work on book number 2. So buy the first one and then pre-order the second one whenever I finish writing it.
Yep, lovely. The mid-range theory for anyone who hasn't read it. Seth, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Look forward to speaking soon.
Thanks a lot for having me, guys.
Cheers. All right, Drew, final thoughts. Do you believe in the Boston Celtics? Do you believe in I still think there's some plus 850 about? Actually, you know what? The best way to bet the series is to bet Tatum Eastern Conference Finals MVP at 10-1. Because Jaylen Brown's averaging 16 points in the series and Tatum is 26-10. So he's pretty close to 100% chance, I think. Not quite, but pretty close. So, yeah, I believe in this stupid team. I think they have life, but what do you reckon?
Yeah. I bet them. While we were doing the show, I was listening to all the breakdowns. I had shared your opinion generally coming into this. And this is just, when you stack up like, Lakers and Celtics are both facing elimination in the next game. The Lakers feel eliminated to me and the Celtics feel live and the price isn't all that different. I like your point on Tatum MVP, Eastern Conference Finals MVP as an angle. But I'm a little worried that it goes to whoever because now it had to, for the Celtics to win, it has to go 7. And in game 7s, things can get weird when you have this start to the series, right? Like Derek White could hit 4 threes in the fourth quarter of game 7 and he wins it. There's a realistic outcome that it just goes to somebody, a little bit random, a little bit more surprising if we get to that point here. But Celtics series to me, I think should be a lot shorter than 8-1, 9-1, whatever best price you can find. This could be crumpled up, thrown in the trash tomorrow. This might not last long. We may get resolution here pretty quickly. But if they do win game 4, if it goes back to Boston, things are going to look a lot different if they're, close to 10-point favorites.
Yeah. I think, it's reductive, but like they just need 1. If they just get 1, then all of a sudden you're looking at plus 290 to win the series because you got 2 out of 3 at home. Then all of a sudden it's 3-1 and you're an 8-point favorite to make it 3-2. And then all of a sudden they're the team that starts not being rattled for once. And I do think this team, as fragile as they are, they have a pretty incredible record when their backs are against the wall.
Sure.
The fact that they came from 3-2 down to beat Milwaukee. They just came from 3-2 down to beat Philadelphia, where that game was done at the end of the third quarter against Philly. I mean, I know it was only like 5-7 points, but it felt completely done. And Tatum was a basket case. And then all of a sudden he wins the game. So I'm not entirely giving up on this Boston team, though. It does feel like the Heat are going to win game 4 by 30. But it also felt like the Celtics were going to beat the Heat 4-1. It's like, it's 8 days ago that Jason Tatum scored the most points anyone ever has in a game 7. Like that team and that player just aren't gone. So I think they will go down swinging.
Would you rather see the Celtics, just flat out narrative, emotional opinion question, would you rather see them win a tight, hard fought game 4? Or would you rather see them kind of find their gear and like be monsters? Because I almost would rather them face more adversity and really like fight through it, and start to get some of the mental advantage over the Heat. Because I got to tell you, man, Jimmy Butler is in everyone's head on that floor. It doesn't look like anyone is enjoying playing this guy.
Yeah, it feels like the Celtics, if they're ever in a close game against the Heat and Butler, it's going to feel like Miami's going to win that game until Boston gets one. Yeah. At the same time, the handicap is kind of the Celtics are the clear better team, and they need to assert that, and they need to get back to being the team that they were in the second quarter of game 1, where it really felt like they were going to win that game by 30 and sweep Miami. But yeah, they need to win a close one at some point. But let's just get the series back to Boston. Let's just win game 4 in Miami and go from there. All right, we're done. Don't forget to check out NBCSportsEdge.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks again to Seth Partnow for joining us. Thank you to you, Drew Dinsick, from myself, Jay Croucher. Thanks, everyone. Good luck with your bets, and we'll be back tomorrow.